Hello, I'm Tony Chapman. I had been hoping when Carol Linder invited me to chair this event that it would be live and face to face because, like many of you, I haven't been getting out enough lately. But last year, as a member of the RIBA Awards group, I did get out to see the contenders for the 2021 National Awards in the West Midlands, which included the two Jaguar Land Rover schemes that we're talking about today. So I do kind of know whereof I speak. So I should warn the speakers that before moving into architecture, where I spent 20 years running the RIBA's awards programme, I was a BBC journalist, so I'm used to interrupting. But I'll try my best to be my best behaviour today. So welcome to this week's Building Stories Talk. This is a series where we celebrate RIBA award-winning buildings and invite their architects to share their experiences. We can all learn something from seeing the innovation, the careful thought and hard work that goes into all these projects, whatever their scale. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Julian Lipscombe and Laura Santana from Bennetts Associates. Hi, guys.
Hello.
And Roddy Langmuir and Carol Costello from Cullinan Studios, who will be telling us about their projects in Warwickshire. So please do send all your questions at any time to our Q&A later. And now, the Jaguar Land Rover Advanced Product Creation Centre in Gaydon sees vehicle design, engineering and purchasing functions brought together under one roof for the first time. It represents a key stage in the company's Destination Zero mission, ultimately to deliver zero emissions, zero accidents and zero congestion. Let's go now to Julian and Laura, who will pick up the story of this remarkable.
Many thanks, Tony. Good afternoon, everybody. Building projects are indeed great stories, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to tell our story. This project occupied 8 years of my career, so it's almost part of me. I'll talk to you about some of the broad concepts, and then Laura will talk to you about the sort of the life and the vitality of the building. So what was it that we were trying to achieve? What was the goal that we were set by Jaguar Land Rover? I mean, Tony's touched on some of it, but you know what is stated on screen there is what we were asked to do, to create something that was of world-class quality, that it would speak of who Jaguar Land Rover are as an organisation, and very, very importantly, would help them in the the sort of the fight for talent, I think it is called, so turning the heads of the brightest and the best graduates to come to work for Jaguar Land Rover, but also to stay for long periods. So that's really, really important part of what we were, the target that we were set. How did we win the job? We won the job through an international competition with a list of, notable other practices. Back in 2012, we had actually had some involvement in aspects of the scheme back in 2011. So, it started from way back then. And one of the things that gave us confidence when we were bidding for the job was that we had noticed online that Jaguar Land Rover were already using our buildings as backdrop for their products. So the two images that you see on screen, one is the Jaguar XJ being launched at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, and the other one at the right-hand side is the launch campaign for the Range Rover Evoque, which was probably the most successful vehicle in the company's history. So we felt that, we were potentially onto a good thing. So that just encouraged us along. In terms of carrying out the job, we worked with Bureau Happold on the engineering side and Grant Associates on landscape, who are both brilliant collaborators, both bringing a wealth of expertise from projects of equal caliber, and with whom we already had a track record. Apologies for the slightly wordy slide, but this just gives you a kind of sense of some of the things that we were trying to achieve there. So Tony's already touched on this being the Advanced Product Creation Centre. So it's the creative brain of Jaguar Land Rovers, where everything is designed, engineered, prototyped, tested, and then made ready for manufacture. But the facilities as we found them back then were not of the same caliber as the quality, the output that was coming out of the company. So what we were asked to do was to create a set of facilities that better matched that sort of pedigree that we've already touched on. All the way through, we tried to keep to a sort of a clarity and a simplicity. This is a very big, complex project with a very large and multi-headed stakeholder community. So we tried at all times to keep things very simple and clear, such that it could be communicated readily, but also received readily and understood, and then sort of used in terms of onward consultation within a company of which at that stage was about sort of 30 to 40,000 strong. So the 6 key principles there are, you can read them faster than I can say them, but those were really things upon which there was sort of yardsticks against which the project was being designed, and also the success of the project would be measured. And in terms of the scale of the project, it's a building for 3,500 staff as part of an overall site community of 11,500 people. So it's effectively the size of a small town in terms of working population. And so that's very much a mindset that we had. So a lot of the ideas and the proposals were scaled in that way. Probably the most significant aspect of the brief, an amazing brief, but the most significant aspect was to relocate Jaguar Design from its historic home in Coventry to sit alongside its sister brand. Lots riding on the success of that. And that was one of the parts of the brief that we focused on most concertedly. Communication, the world of architecture, the career of architecture, one of the most important skills of all is to be a good communicator, and dare I say as well, a good listener also. And one of the things we were very keen to do with Jaguar Land Rover was to recognize that they have their own processes. They are designers of vehicles. We are designers of buildings. And so one of the early things that we did was to map our processes along the bottom there, the RIBA plan of work, with their processes across the top, so that they could understand that when we were talking about RIBA 1, they were talking about theme development. And we put it into their language, and that really helped them understand the process that they were a part of. It also got them very comfortable and kind of relaxed, and also it engendered a kind of trust in us that we understood them as a client, and we were prepared and able to talk their language, and that really, really helped. Transformation of the estate was a really key thing. So as well as 59,000 square meters of building, we also transformed a large swathe of their central campus. It was a former military base, a former Air Force base, and it still had that quality to it. It was rather sort of cold, rather sterile. And so one of the things we were trying to do was to vest it with the qualities of being a kind of a place of importance and a place that would turn the heads. The site is right in the middle of nowhere, which is important for a facility which is to do with research and development. Highly confidential things are being tested and evaluated. It's one of the reasons why the RAF chose it as a location in the first place, was the fact that it was a secretive location. And so, but it still had that kind of sense of having been a former military environment. So one of the things we did was to look at where it is in the world, set within the rolling Warwickshire countryside, very close to Compton Verney, a beautiful setting by Capability Brown. And so we took a lot of the clues and cues there from how that environment worked to try and soften the site and bring nature right within the boundary, take out lots of car parking, take lots of life expired buildings to create a place of arrival with a lake and a setting, which is also part of the sustainable site drainage strategy, but also a park. As I said earlier, this is a community the size of a town. Previously, they had nowhere to go, no amenity. And so what we did was to put a park right into the heart of the site to green the site, but also give them somewhere to go at lunchtime. One of the other things we were trying to do by exploiting where the building is in the world was to say that this is Jaguar Land Rover, this is its home, this is what makes it one of the things that makes it distinctive. So in terms of talking to that community of the talented graduates and saying to them, don't go and work for BMW, don't go and work for Porsche, don't go to Stuttgart, don't go to Tesla in California, come to work for Jaguar Land Rover in South Warwickshire. You get to work in a great building. But also, they were also competing with the tech sector, so the Apples and the Facebooks and the Googles of this world, because increasingly automotive has a lot of technology in it. So that is what we were trying to do, was to create something that was distinctively of its place to turn the head and bring people in. I mentioned earlier about the importance of clarity and simplicity. So what we did was we distilled the project down to 3 key concepts. We talked about that idea of effectively the building being the scale, the site being the scale of a small town. So a lot of the design ideas are about departments having a presence within an overall sort of urban structure. Departments having front doors on a high street. They use a term called town halls for some of their kind of communal meetings. And so we talked in that kind of language to make it give everyone a clarity of what the anatomy of this new place is going to be. Everybody had been spread to the 4 corners, so we wanted to bring everybody together underneath an all-enveloping roof, a signature roof, and then with a weave of connectivity to bring those departments together so they could interact with each other, so that you get that sort of energy of serendipitous interaction to drive the company forward and to drive new ideas. The overall organisation of the building it's clustered around an existing building which has about 3,000 engineers within it, and then we added these new facilities as a kind of series of pavilions. One of the things we were very keen to do was to lock the building into the site. You may have noticed on the site plan it has a very distinctive triangular geometry. That was generated by the runways that the RAF put down in World War II. And they have a very particular sort of rhythm to them. And so one of the things we did with the building was to look at a kind of super grid that could be applied across the site. And if you strike the hypotenuse of that super grid, you actually pick up the angle of the runways. So we were trying to lock the life of the genesis of the new building into the root of the building as its sort of its historical basis. And then this shows the result of all of that reworking, and it is a place transformed. It is a much softer place. It is a much more engaging place. People have somewhere to go at lunchtime. They have plenty of amenity. Nature has come deep within. We created a new lake, which is both a wildlife reserve, and it is also part of the sustainable site drainage strategy. And it also creates a very strong first impression. As again, that was a sort of nod back to Compton Verney and Capability Brown and the way that he sort of envisaged, the approach to a building set in the English countryside. And rather pleasingly as well, Jaguar Land Rover have used many times since the building was occupied the building as a backdrop for the products that they create. So we always wanted the building to have a correlation with what they were doing, and we think we spot that in the fact that they are again using our buildings as a setting for the amazing vehicles that they produce. And then, one of the sort of key elements of the building is the timber roof. At the time, it was the largest timber roof in Europe. We weren't just doing it to make it the largest timber roof in Europe, but it was, it just sort of speaks of the scale of what we were trying to contain underneath it, and also to make sure that the building, focuses on interaction, diversity, sustainability, and all of those other kind of important parts of the modern workplace. Now I'm going to hand over to Laura, who's going to take you through some of the interior language.
Thank you, Julian. So a building of this scale and complexity requires some principles that could help us, could guide us and guide the stakeholders through the process and through the design. So we came up with 3 overarching themes, which were interaction, engagement, and empowerment. Which then translated into architectural spaces and architectural elements. So the first one, interaction, is something we all have missed so much during the last few years, and it's so important in the workplace. That translates into communal areas, internal streets where people bump into each other and exchange ideas. The second one is engagement, and it's all about celebrating working for JLR, celebrating the brand and the history of the company, and engaging the employees with it. And that translates into exhibition and product display and identity. And lastly, empowerment is about supporting the staff and providing them with alternative working spaces, connection to nature, and amenities to produce stuff, allow the staff to be more creative and more productive ultimately. On On sustainability, we produce a low carbon building that use systems like the taps, which includes this cooling and heating system that includes pipes within the slabs. Of course, there is an important CLT roof, which is charged with symbolism. In one hand, it talks about the idea of all of the employees working under one roof. And in the other hand, of course, timber works very well from a sustainability perspective and also provides warmth to the space. On community, yes, as we said, the idea of everybody coming together under one roof, and the idea of architecture being also used as a recruitment tool and making the staff feeling empowered and inspired by their workplace is so important. And the carefully selected palette also bring warmth and more humanity to the space. Of course, there were some key spaces, like the one on the screen, which is the Jaguar Design Studio. As Julian mentioned, it was the first time that Jaguar moved from their historical Coventry facilities. And this space it had to perform a series of functions. So, of course, it's a place for inspiration. It's a place that is almost like an artist studio, a place where models for prototypes are created in clay in 1-to-1 scale. So it has that element of art in it, but at the same time had to perform highly from a technical and practical perspective. And therefore, the brief had many technical requirements, from lighting control to temperature control, to, for example, the requirement for the modeling plates to be completely flat to enable the designers to model their clay models as precisely as possible. Another important aspect of this space is the idea that there is a continuous flow and connection between the modeling areas and the desk areas, and then some communal areas as well, so designers can flow freely and again bump into each other, exchange ideas, and see what is being produced on the other side on the modeling studio while checking something on their computers.
Great. Thank you, Lara. Another really important part of the project was how it was going to be delivered. So the delivery was with Langmuir as the main contractor. And we felt very strongly that a building for a company who designs and manufactures and assembles cars, that if there should be a way in which the construction of the building reflects who they are as an organization. There were lots and lots of ways that we tried to reflect the sort of DNA of Jaguar Land Rover, but this was an important one. So it was a really significant adoption of DFMA, design for manufacture and assembly. So a lot of the building, up to 30% of the building, was fabricated in a factory and brought to site and assembled. And that has all kind of benefits in terms of quality, in terms of program. We see it as a really important part of the future of large-scale construction. And another really important aspect of the teamwork that we established, we had this sort of mantra of one team, which we well and truly achieved with Langmuir, was to empower the people who are making the building as well. So the image in the middle at the top is a site talk, a toolbox talk, which was given by me to about 300 of the site operatives to explain to them, what I'm explaining to you now. What is the building about? What are we trying to achieve here? What role their work plays in the life of the project, and also to celebrate the fact that the image bottom right, there was a real kind of beauty and care taken to even to things that were going to be hidden from sight. And so culture was, so quality was a culture that ran right the way through the project, and it's something that we worked very hard on. When I was training to be an architect, nobody ever told me that stamina would be one of the most important qualities that would be required as part of my career. But my word, you need it, and you certainly need it on a job of this kind of scale, because as we chart across the top there, when you start to measure things in the cycle of the Olympic Games, then you know that it's eating up a significant chunk of your life. As I say, it was 8 years from start to finish. We just snuck in before when the Tokyo Olympics was meant to happen, and it was the most extraordinary journey. Probably 3 years of build and 5 years of project gestation and getting the thing across the line. But throughout that time, an amazing group of people came together at our end. Architects who are all listed out on screen there, so a huge thank you to them. This is about teamwork, this is about collaboration, and it was an extraordinary experience for all of us. And then just to close, as much as we were absolutely delighted to win the National RIBA Award, first and foremost, what we check is that our clients are happy with what we've done. And Jerry is a very significant member of the Jaguar Land Rover community. He represents everything in terms of creativity. And as you can see from his comment there, he is feeling that we've well and truly met and perhaps surpassed the brief that we originally set. So that counts for everything for us. It's lovely to win an award as well. And then just to close, this was the opening ceremony at the building back in 2019. Unfortunately, the building then, of course, went into lockdown, like with everything else, but it's coming back to life now. And very significantly, the board of Jaguar Land Rover, who have been based in Coventry for many years, have decided that the facility at Gaydon, this project here, is so good that they are actually moving themselves to inhabit the building. So I think we can safely say we now have designed the global headquarters of Jaguar Land Rover, which is very gratifying indeed. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight to what we were trying to achieve there, and I'll hand you back to Tony.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Julian and Lara. That was great. I've got 1 or 2 questions coming in from the audience in chat, so please keep them coming. But first, I wanted to ask a couple of things myself. The motor industry is necessarily one of the most secretive, as you referred to, and yet your brief was to encourage cross-disciplinary working. So how did you resolve that dichotomy?
Yeah, cross-disciplinary working, but also making everybody feel that they were part of a collective. So the building deliberately has one front door, which is a significant change. Previously, the site had been occupied by a series of silos, a series of individual departments. But what we wanted to do was to bring everybody in through a single front door, hence the scale of that reception space that you see. It's scaled both for a community of 3,500 people, well, 12,000 to 11,500 if you count the whole site, but it's also scaled for cars, because one of the things they're doing is to move cars and drive cars around inside that building. How do you create openness and interaction, but also protect secrecy? The Jaguar Design Studio and the Land Rover Design Studio are the most precious parts of that security diagram. And what we talked about was a sort of layering of an onion, if you will. So there are careful layers of filtering of people who visit the space. Only those with the ultimate access can get into the Jaguar Design Studio and the Land Rover Design Studios. But everybody else within that can interact fully department to department. It's a very, in a way, it's a kind of, the building is open and it encourages interaction, but the use of access control is just a very subtle layer over the top of that to make sure that only the people who need to go to certain places are able to go to certain places.
I see. I've got another kind of devil's advocate question here. It's a vast complex, this, capable of accommodating what, 11,000 people, with all the other parts that already pre-existed. Now, I don't know what percentage of the capacity it's working at now, but do you think you'd have been commissioned to build a building on this scale today, post-COVID?
Very good question, Tony. I probably, because Jaguar Land Rover still occupy a lot of other buildings in the locality. So they certainly moved out of a lot of buildings when the one that we created, when we created the one that we were doing. But they still have people distributed in the West Midlands in different locations. And there is I think they recognise the value of everybody being together. I mean, they use a term for the building now. I think they call it the reactor. So there's a kind of sense that there is an energy within the place, which is to do with people being together. And so, I think, it still absolutely serves a useful purpose, and it could accommodate, it can accommodate 3,500 people at the moment. If they change the way in which they use the space, you could have actually up to probably, 4,000 or 5,000 people using the building as their base, and then sort of moving, working in a sort of a more sort of hybrid fashion. So in terms of the effects of new ways of working, I think the building probably would have still been created. In terms of other sort of factors like finances and other things, who knows?
Question from someone in the audience. Josh asks, what was the biggest challenge of designing on an industrial scale building of this size?
I think the biggest challenge was to maintain a human scale within a building of that vast quantity of floor space, to create a building that encouraged people to want to be there, that made them feel like they belong, so that it's not somewhere which intimidates. It's somewhere which sort of nurtures and supports and encourages. I think probably one of the most significant things is we spent a lot of time thinking about the way the circulation works in particular, so that we can maximize those opportunities where a community of that scale, you're always bumping into people in corridors, on staircases, very careful placing of, sort of T-points and things like that, which all comes from, the root of that is in another building in the West Midlands, another award winner, the PowerGen building, which is the building that I started working on when I joined the practice 30 years ago last week. And that looked at space syntax, which was a kind of a method of evaluating how buildings encourage human circulation and interaction to foster a sort of a lively, energetic and inquiring, workforce who can start to, can help to move the company forward. So I think I hope, certainly one of the strong bits of feedback that we get is that people feel that, so users of the building feel that people are front and central in the life of the building. It's not just about the ground spaces.
Question from Megan Thomas, who compliments you on your beautiful key concept drawings, and then goes on to say, how is the surrounding nature responding to the building now? So has the wildlife moved back in, I suppose?
So I'm conscious I'm talking a lot. I'll just respond to a key part of that. I think nature is responding very well. Yeah, as when we found the building, it was all nature rolled up to the fence, and then everything was clipped grass thereafter. Whereas of course now we have sort of the major water body. We've got the park. We have other things. That the local wildfowl are starting to take over the lake. We had a community of crested newts who have been moved to a new home, still on the same estate. And nature is starting to come back in. We were sort of deliberately planting species with Bennetts Associates, planting species that would plants that would encourage butterfly life, insect life, and the like. So I think certainly the sense is that whilst the people have been away, nature has continued to want to occupy what we created.
And a plug for Bennetts Associates, I think, are responsible for the landscape, which
terrific. They did a brilliant job.
Looked pretty good when I saw it, even in the middle of a drought. Another curveball, oh God, much more difficult than mine. This is from Darren Jones. Lovely project, but did you have any qualms or internal debate about working for a car manufacturer and one making some pretty polluting models, given your practice's environmental stance?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Nice one.
Did we have qualms about it? We certainly asked ourselves questions about that. But what we felt very strongly was that, there was, whilst yes, they have a history and a reputation for sort of vehicles that are gas guzzlers, I suppose you would call them. They also have a very firm commitment to moving towards electrification, and Jaguar are one of the leading brands in the world who are fronting that charge. So I think we felt very strongly that we could collaborate with them as part of the journey that they were on as an organization to help them get to somewhere more more responsible. Another aspect that we talked about quite a bit was the fact that not only what they produce, but where they are. So a site that is out in the middle of the Warwickshire countryside with 12,000 people commuting to it every day. But there is no escaping that you cannot have a facility of this kind in an area which is going to be too close to prying eyes. So there is something fundamental about the way that the location of the building being out in the middle of the countryside. But again, we talked to them about.
Now, I'm afraid. Sorry, I'll be asking you both, Julian and Laura, to join us again later. But now we're going to move on to our next guests, Roddy Langmuir and Carol Costello from Cullinan. The National Automotive Innovation Centre is a tribute to the late Professor Bhattacharya's vision. The brief for the centre, based at Warwick University, was for simplicity and strength of purpose, turning a complex assembly of spaces into an immediately legible building, a sustainable space that inspires designers, engineers and academics to develop the next generation of transport. So, Roddy, Carol, tell us all about it.
Great. Okay, I mean, NAIC was really a new idea, the National Automotive Innovation Centre, and it involved the creation of a whole brand new institution. It's different to the JLR HQ that you've been just been hearing about, in that it's also bringing together academia, industry, and researchers all under one roof. So it's a different model. It's a national centre for innovation. Now, what we'll try to do is give you a bit of Carol and I give you a bit of flavour of this. So I'm going to talk about the sort of vision for the project, how we responded to the client's vision, and take you sort of around about the project and inside it. And then Carol's going to go back to a sort of later briefing exercise that we did to develop the whole sort of look and feel of the building. So I'm going to flick through this. Okay, so how do we get the job? We've been working on the campus for 20 years on 5 different buildings for the Warwick Manufacturing Group, which was led by Kumar Bhattacharya. But we were also in competition with 6 project management-led teams, and it came down to a head-to-head with JLR's their preferred team, people they'd been working with before, and we had to win them over at interview. So this was our team, and you can see the clients group there, Jaguar, Land Rover, Tata Motors, and Warwick Manufacturing Group, under the umbrella of Warwick University, and our team below it. So it all began really as Kumar's dream, but the vision had to be worked out. A steering group was formed of the clients, and we helped them reach these vision statements, which became a reference for later decisions throughout the project. I think that was a really important fact. We got to know each other through building visits, notably the Manchester Co-op HQ and the BBC in London, shown here. Defining the brief took many months, and the project really grew. It was a time of great success for the companies in automotive, and they were investing in research. So the project grew in scale and scope. We visited their workplaces, a level of chaos, which you can see, but also a certain buzz to them. And sorry about this. Eventually, yes, brief matched the budget, and the makeup of NAIC as a new sort of ecosystem was agreed. and a really diverse, technically complex array of spaces was put together as a final brief. Now, I've got a few sort of diagrams here which will help explain something about the way these different companies who, yes, you've heard about IP, how important it is, how can they be working together under a single roof? So at first we had to talk to people apart. We talked to different companies separately, but they gradually realized that if they shared facilities, they'd get much more bang for your buck, if you like, and they were able to extend the research they were doing. And they realized in a similar way to the filters that Bennetts have been talking about, where you gradually secrete the sort of most private spaces in the depths of the building, but there's a default to openness. And so the building is as open as it possibly can be, and that's the default. But there are perhaps private spaces within that, which, sorry, slides are jumping. Private spaces that can be formed within that where needed, and questions about whether it was acoustic or visual privacy that was really required. So here we are. Another important factor was the fact that we had to try and break the sort of model of the science park, very private building surrounded by cars with mirror glass walls, really keeping everyone out. And NAIC was right at the heart of the campus, so it was about bringing people into the centre of Warwick University, and again with this default for openness, looking for connections between everyone involved. So this is a sketch which we did before we had even developed a brief. And it's just a reminder that even a kind of half-baked sketch, which this is, becomes really important in developing an idea and communicating that. You know, without drawings, projects are just, you know, words and budgets, and the drawings bring them to life. So this was regarded by our clients as a £10 million sketch because of it got some funding over the line. At a particular meeting. So here we are. We're on a crossing within the campus, a key pedestrian crossing, and the building is acting as a gateway to the university. It's on the campus entrance, visible from the campus entrance. So we created a major porch at this point, which is on that pedestrian crossing, but also leads you inside the building. Here's the front seen from the campus approach. So a very large porch, which is in the scale of the whole project, inviting you in. Once inside, right ahead of you was the main engineering hall to the project. And we took a lot of effort to get this large glass window right in front of the front door. So as you walk in, you're looking through the engineering hall. And an example of the kind of privacy work we did, the hospital-like curtains that are seen at the end of the hall can hide away very private projects at the back of the hall while maintaining an open view for visitors when they come into the building. Now, together with this main engineering hall, the design studios above created the kind of the mass of the building, if you like. And we developed a kind of processional route, which took you up through the collaborative hub of the building, accessing all the activities off to the side. And it's climbing up across these large central spaces. And these are all dressed inside with meeting rooms and casual meeting space, lots of private cubicles for telephone calls, lots of things happening in this center, people having lunch, people having impromptu meetings. So it was all about that, getting that buzz in the heart of the building. And another way perhaps to describe the space in the building as a multi-tool, whereby the facilities can be used, the combination of blades, if you like, can be used to help support a particular research project. and multiple options are available through the very specialist spaces within the building. This Arup's drawing gives you a lovely idea of the complexity of the servicing of a building like this. Hugely wide-ranging types of space which had to be serviced. And again, I think we've already discussed this today, but the design conundrums of the building having to be practical as the Land Rover on the left, but also represent the sleekness and the refinement of Jaguar on the right, and the building having to do both. Real lesson with the car designers about editing. They're very, very good at editing the decisions that are made. And in a large project, this becomes very important, where simplicity is hard to get. There is a famous car that was designed by an architect, much loved, the old 2CV, but and a very practical car. So I think the car industry, looking at the construction industry, sees a rather crude, a cruder version of how materials are put together. And I always kind of liken that to the fact that they spend 6 years designing a single room, and we were designing 1,000 rooms, and every single one was a prototype. Very little time for the refinement that a car receives in design. So here's a little trip through the elevational studies that we were doing. Inside, you can imagine all of the practicalities of making an interior, busting out and trying to be represented on the facade. But we were looking, how could we edit this all down? And here you can see us trying to create a simple facade of a base, middle, and top. At one stage, the car designers themselves had to go, and you can see a very different approach to form and surface here. But eventually, it distilled out to a sort of socially interactive base, an umbrella roof, which would reach out and unite all the different people and activities and disciplines within the building, and a veil in the middle, a wrap as a sunscreen, which would help bring a sort of unity across many different activities happening behind it. And then a very intensive, close landscape brought right up to the edge of the building, so that social base can spill out, that the pedestrian routes across the university can enjoy it, and the activities that were externalized could be brought down to that ground floor and open out beyond it. The roof was made as a modular system of panels, repeating panels on a 15-meter module. These are just some clips of views of the glulam and crosslam going in, and creating these acoustic coffers, which run across the entire project, as I said. Here you get an idea of the scale of the whole enterprise. And then what we would call the fifth elevation, how complex the roof had to be in order to bring daylight into the heart of the building, collect solar through PVs, and also do all the servicing requirements of the building. So this editing process, I think, was a very important element. The walls, we used mega panels, as we called them, working with Arabs to design panels that could span right across the height and breadth of this building, prefabricated in Austria, using CLT as a base, an insulated CLT panel. Very simple, robust membrane on top, and then finished in a mesh, which was able to reflect in daylight by the pitch of this mesh, which is varied for the different elevations of the building, with respect to the solar aspect. And it does give this this sense of translucency to the facade, and it modulates light as it hits it from the different weather patterns. Okay, now I think I'm just going to hand over to put on a couple of little clips, film clips. So if Philippe could put those on, that would be great.
Students, visitors to the university, they all can bump into one another, see the wonderful building and all the work that's going on inside.
What really drives technology? It's the people. And it's the way you actually connect academia with the professionals in the particular industry, in our case, in the automotive industry.
This facility will give us a fantastic capability to bring together companies, students, supply chain, academics to do some great innovative work.
We want the next generation of youngsters to want to go into the automotive sector, want to really grasp engineering, and the building is an uplifting space to achieve that.
The way we've approached the design is to allow private spaces to happen on one side of the building and public spaces to connect to the campus on the other. In the middle, we have the kind of collaborative hub. We've placed large engineering hall and design studios on top of each other, so we actually have cars up on the third floor of the building. We've then built up against these big spaces, almost like a kind of, if you imagine a hill town of terraced meeting spaces where people can see each other across the building. We've also connected the building to nature and to the natural world. We've brought in daylight through large openings in this roof. And when you look across the open research floors, you can see the canopy of trees outside that surround the building. So we've used timber in different ways in the building, from the roof, which is very visible, where glue laminated beams and cross-laminated timber decks run right across this building and unify everything together, to the wall cassettes, which are not seen, but the modular panels that create the walls are all timber, and then to the handrails, which you actually touch. And the idea was to give people a connection to the natural material in flowing lines.
Purpose is around sharing ideas, even if that's just through general conversations in the corridor, to actually providing the working facilities where we can all work together and actually see those ideas through to full working solutions.
One of the great things about NAIC is that we can bring our students, some of whom are undergraduates, some of whom are graduates, some of whom are people from industry, and we can bring them in contact with the best research teams in the UK so we can help them learn quickly and then go out into the workplace and deliver great new products for industry.
Okay, great. Let's that gives you a bit of a flavour of the inside, but let's get on to Carol now.
Hi, everybody. If I can share my slides. So there's the process involved a commission for the interior design, which meant we had to have a whole another layer of consultation with many more people. And this was happening while the building was on site. So we had people who weren't involved in the original briefing, but cared really deeply about the interior, their workspaces and their meeting spaces. And we had to maintain this kind of concept of the collaborative hub where everybody was coming together. And yet there was a tendency for people to kind of want to revert back into their silos of their organization during this briefing. So that was a real sort of people management challenge that we met and enjoyed. And with that, though, there was still within each organization the need to understand exactly what they're trying to achieve and who they needed to be close to and how they were really going to occupy the building. So loads of time spent listening to people, looking at what they do. There was a lot of the engineers talking about the introversion of their personalities and how they'd love to just be kind of tinkering away with kind of small electronics and rigs. And socializing had to be a bit more organized, but they knew it was important, but not their natural tendency. And certain cultural events that were really important, like JLR have an egg race every year where they all kind of get a brief to design a little gizmo, race it down a track and crack an egg or fry it or whatever. But we had to make sure we had space for that in the building. And everyone was coming to the project with other places in the world they'd been that they thought were leaders in kind of creative design thinking. And we were, bringing those stories into the building. So the key thing was we were testing these ideas through drawing. And we used really clear illustrations of all the collaborative spaces from the foyer all the way up to the top floor, looking to see, could they stage a town hall event where they got all 1,000 people from the building into the foyer and atrium? Could they have exhibition of vehicle design? Could they have small informal talks? Could they have more formal talks? And could they hold a banquet there? And then looking again with our software to really create engaging visualizations to get people to understand how all the audio, visual, and IT would be coordinated in this space. Thinking about, what kind of equipment, and even designing special staging and exhibition equipment for the foyer, and looking at how that would then sit in the foyer through our kind of visualizations with specific, flexible, practical furniture to go in that space. And yes, making room and proving it to them that you could get the space for their annual egg race up on the first floor in the collaborative hub. And it was a great pleasure to work with the automotive designers who are all about look and feel of car interiors and think about that for the building as well. So we came up with, specific colorways that supported wayfinding and vertical circulation, helped add variety and life to the collaborative meeting spaces, and look at those in real detail. So these drawings looked at all the actual furniture they would have, but also illustrated how that would be really practical for them to have meetings and collaborate in that space and do the brainstorming that they needed to do, or have, booths for one-on-one or solo kind of thinking, and even into the design studios, what the look and feel would be there to inspire their designers in these private spaces where there was more secure intellectual property being explored. And remembering as well, the building has several outdoor balconies, and so it was important to see that as a workspace, but also to support well-being in the building. So then we finally finished this building. It was open about 1.5 years before the pandemic locked it down, and we managed to get a really valuable POE study in that time. And we'd like to do some more studies with them now post-pandemic, but to actually visit the building. So these are the photographs of the finished building, and to feel the sense of, daylight washing through the space, the quality of the acoustics in these large collaborative atriums areas, the scale of the building, all of that you can't really experience digitally, no matter what you do with your Oculus goggles. It's a real pleasure to be in the building, the color, the feel, and to just watch how people are actually using the building. And in so many ways, it is what we imagined they would do, down to this idea of the town hall meeting. This was actually the grand opening, which was just a couple weeks before the whole nation locked down. But it was great to see that what we'd planned for actually happened. And I suppose just to end with as well, the other life of this building is on social media. So it's gone from a kind of digital drawing imagination process to the real building, and now it has this other life that lives globally throughout the world. And I'm going to finish there. Thank you.
Thanks both of you. That was brilliant. Wasn't it great to see the facade designed by car designers? Bit of a disaster. I think they should stick to designing their one room while you do the 1,000 rooms. Just one question from me, and then probably one from the audience, because we are, I'm afraid, running out of time. As you know, probably both of you, the RIBA adjusted its timetables this year so that the awards for buildings are for those that have been in use for a year. This didn't apply to you, but how's the building performing, do you think?
Are you right answering that, Roddy?
Sorry, can anyone mute yourself, please?
Yes, yes, it's been it's been a really difficult time. You know, it was really getting going, and beginning to get the buzz that central place looks for, needs. And yeah, the pandemic has been difficult. I think. I mean, an example which we always use is that that Tata, in before coming into this building, we're doing in the order of 850 transit continental flights across to India every year, and through occupying the building, it's down to 80. So a tenth of the transcontinental flights, through being able to work with their teams here in the UK. But I think it's gradually getting up to speed. There's going to be new partners coming in. It's all very sensitive. I mean, a massive issue is this IP thing and finding partners that can work together in a collaborative way within the car industry. Julian mentioned it at the start of his presentation. But in a university context, I think the research that they do in this building is way ahead. It's 12 years ahead of completing production. Whereas the Production Design Center, which Julian's been talking about, is 6 years before models are produced. So it's a different kind of research, and it's less sensitive. And I think that's where the academic setting, is going to be a great place over time to help that.
We had a question from the great economist Adam Smith, who says, did you modify your nature-led approach when working with Jaguar Land Rover as a client?
You want to answer that, Carol?
I would say that we introduced nature everywhere we possibly could, in terms of, and Roddy spoke a bit about it, the connections we made on the campus, and really that solved a lot of long-standing problems about how people walk around the University of Warwick campus. And it's part of a wider strategy the campus has to make it a more walkable campus with more planting. And we worked with Bennetts Associates at the front. So there is planting, there's a new water system at the front of the building. And when you're inside, the access to natural materials and daylight was really important for us.
Lovely. I'm going to bring back Julian and Laura now, and it would be great if we could have a kind of general conversation, briefly, I'm afraid, because we are really out of time. And let me ask you all, you kind of shared a client, both of you, not quite, not literally. But would you like to compare notes, warts and all, on JLR as a client?
Well, Julian, we did talk to each other, and during the process, sometimes that might have been thought of as crying on each other's shoulders, and sometimes it was actually very supportive. I mean, generally, I think it was supportive because it was good to know that somebody else was going, through the same things that we were in developing such a design, with the car industry. So I think I found it was a sort of brotherhood, if you like, between Bennett's work and our work, there.
Absolutely. I think that really helped, Roddy. And I mean, you had a sort of, in a way, a kind of triple-headed client with JLR and the two other organizations. You could argue perhaps ours was an easier task because we had just the one client, but a company of that scale, 30, 40,000 people with, lots of senior executives who are, all immersed in their parts of the business. I would say that without being flippant, in a way, the architecture was the easy bit. The really tricky bit was getting a group of people like that in one room. That was challenge enough of its own, and then getting them to talk about one thing that would represent them as a business. And Jaguar Land Rover is a sort of an umbrella over the two main brands. Everyone's very clear what the two brands stand for, but nobody was entirely clear what Jaguar Land Rover as an umbrella meant. And so for the first time, we were putting a sort of face on that. And so I think, the achievement of getting that group of people into a room and getting them to agree to spend £200 million on that idea that for me, that was one of the great challenges, and also hopefully one of the great successes of the project.
And there was a lot of value engineering, I think, went on both projects. Either of you, what did you lose? What did you regret most?
I think value engineering at its best is part of that editing process that I was talking about. And I think what was interesting was that the roof was there from the very first sketch, and it stood the course. I think it was only brought up in a value engineering meeting once by our project managers and QSs, but almost tentatively, because everyone had really bought into what it was saying about the future of technology and timber and the low carbon future of mobility. What we haven't said is that the car industry is a much bigger industry than just cars. It's really about mobility. And the sort of visionary people working in our client groups are really we're always going to need to move. We're always going to need to move around the place. So doing that in a low carbon sustainable way is the future that they're aiming for. So they're great. They're really setting out a future in that respect.
And Lara, any regrets?
Any regrets during the process?
Yeah.
No, not really. I think we are all delighted with the result, and particularly pleased that the client at JLR are so happy with it, enjoying the building and as it was intended. So no, it was a long process, as Julian described, much longer for him than for me. So at times, difficult to keep going. But I think every time we had a possibility to visit the work the designers were doing, seeing them live doing their models, we came back reinvigorated and inspired, and it was definitely very, very enjoyable process.
And Carol, what about you?
Well, I think it's always important to put yourself in your client's shoes and realize the risks they're taking as well, and the stress they're under, etc., and the people they have to manage, and you've kind of come in to do a bit of that people management with them. It's been one of the pleasures of my life to work on that project. With all, if you want life to be easy, don't become an architect, but it's never boring. It's never boring, is it? So
never. Happy architects, happy clients. Wonderful stories. Thank you very much indeed, both of you, and congratulations. Building Stories will be back again next Tuesday evening, and it's an in-person event at Portland Place next week. Our host, past president Ben Derbyshire, he will introduce architect William Matthews from WMA, who is going to tell us the story of the bridge at Tintagel, one of the most complicated and ambitious heritage projects seen in the UK in recent years. The bar will be open from 6 p.m, so do come along and join us there for a drink. As we say, you have to provide your own booze. For next week's talk, you can sign up for tickets by following us. Thank you.